저는 나눔의 집에 27년생 이옥천이라고 합니다. Natulog ako kanwari, natulog ako. Gabi-gabi yan ginagawa.
All I wanted to do was to wash away all the shame, the dirt, just wash it away.
100번도 더 말했어. 100번도 더 했어.
Just outside of Seoul in Gwangju City in Korea stands the House of Sharing, both a museum and home to the surviving comfort women, or 할머니es, meaning grandma in Korean. It's no longer a rare sight to see groups of foreigners taking tours of the museum in various languages. These tour guides, ranging from Canadians to Japanese to French, are volunteers who also study the issue to educate more people.
This is an issue that's really important to me as a woman and, as someone interested in human rights. And when I first came to the museum last year, I was very moved by what I saw here, and so I wanted to be a part of the team.
日本人だから。私がここでできることは、たくさんの人に実際ハルモニーと会って聞いた話をたくさんの人に真実を伝えたいから。
The 할머니es, all in their 80s and 90s, are weak and fragile, but on days when they can work up the strength, they tell their stories to students from all over the world.
학생들 안녕하세요. 먼 데서 이끌은 차다 할머니 뵈러 와서 만나 반갑습니다. 군인은 많은 접대를 하라는 거예요. 할 날에 40명 내지 50명 접대를 하는
The 할머니 recounts her harrowing past of 70 years ago, and for many of these younger generation, it's shocking history they never learned in school.
J'étais déjà venue une fois en Corée, il y a quelques mois, et j'ai vu dans mon guide, il y avait un petit paragraphe à propos de ça. Et j'ai été choquée parce qu'on ne parle pas du tout de ça en France, je ne connaissais pas du tout. Et oui, il faut que plus de gens soient au courant de ce qui s'est passé pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Donc voilà.
Now, nearly 7 decades have passed since the end of World War II. Out of the 234 Korean women who officially registered themselves as comfort women, or the victims of sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II, only 58 of them remain alive. Roughly 2/3 have passed away, having never seen the Japanese government take full state responsibility for what they've done. Now, the remaining handful continues to fight a fierce war of their own, and it's not a case that's limited to this country. Manila, the Philippines. Not only is it the most densely populated cities in the world, it's also the capital of one of the fastest growing economies in Asia. But the architectural legacy of the city's past is testimony to its troubled history. While most are from the Spanish colonial period, for the people of the Philippines, they are more so reminders of a harrowing past during World War II. First built Built in 1587, San Agustin Monastery is closely tied to the history of the Philippines, and that includes the Japanese occupation during World War II. The whole church was turned into a concentration camp for prisoners, and various tortures and atrocities were committed on the local people, as well as the sexual enslavement of the Filipino women by the Japanese military. Just outside the city of Manila in Quezon City is the Lila Pilipina Lola Center, a community center for lolas, the local Tagalog word for grandmothers. But the lolas here aren't just ordinary elderly. They are victims of military sexual slavery during World War II. What is your name?
I am Lola Pilar Prias.
How old were you when the Japanese took you?
I am 16 years old during the time.
My name is Narcisa Claveria. Nung kinuha ako ng Japanese soldier, 13 years old.
1943, I am 14 years old.
Lola Estelita D. I am 83 years old this coming.
Out of the 173 Filipino women who came forward as victims of the Japanese sexual slavery, nearly one-half of them have passed away. And the remaining handful of survivors still live with open wounds, their dark past haunting them nearly 70 years on.
Gabi-gabi yan, ginagawa nila sa amin yan. Every night, we are awake. Kaya yung kapatid kong isa, nasiraan ng ulo. Kasi hindi lang naman isa mangre-rip sa iyo eh. Dalawa, tatlo.
Japanese soldier asking me her language, but I do not know the language of the Japanese. Kinuha ko dito. At saka, he get the jungle knife here in this part, and then he stabbed me here. Look at my personal appearance.
They're riding the truck, 3 Japanese, and they take me to the garrison. I was raped there in the garrison.
Since the establishment of the organization in the early 1990s, the Filipino comfort women have been carrying out various activities demanding apology and justice from the Japanese government. But that number has been on a fast decline in recent years.
This picture, all of them, she died 2005. This one, 2005 also. Lola Rosa Henso, 1997. Lola Francisca Austari, she died 4 years ago. And Lola Purificacion, last August, she died. The women suffered under the Japanese military sexual slavery. They destroyed the human rights and the social rights of the individual. The right to study, the right to be with people. We do not have to suffer that the society will ostracize us, will isolate us.
Fort Santiago is part of the structures of Manila referred to as intramuros. During World War II, the defense fortress built by the Spanish was captured by the Japanese Imperial Army and used as prison camps and dungeons. At this fortress, in these cells, Filipino prisoners of war lost their lives and women were kept locked to serve the Japanese military as sex slaves. Lola Hilaria rarely comes to this site as it brings back sorrowful memories of her close friend Lola Asiang. During the war, Asiang was held captive and raped by the Japanese military, during which she saw her husband covered in blood being thrown into the dungeon. Lola Asiang can no longer tell her story as she has become completely senile.
Lola Asiang is there.
Lola Asiang was there, but here...
Her husband who was tortured and then thrown here because at high tide, the water goes up from the river. So she is there. And then she said, my husband. So that is her story, no?
For Lola Hilaria, this is a place of exceptional pain and agony.
Because we are a very good companion. She always say to me, pray for me. That's why I always remember Lola as young.
Back at the Lola's house, the now aged Lolas in their frail, wrinkled bodies wonder just for how much longer their minds will remain agile to recount their stories, or if ever they will stop living in their somber past.
The Lolas were growing old. Fastly, they were growing weak. So many were sick, no? So many died already. So I fear that it might not be in the lifetime of the Lola. So we advocates, we fear that the Japanese government will be too late. And I think the whole world should also contribute their effort, their initiative, or whatever in the eradication of violence on women.
It's hard to imagine the village of Mapanica looking any different today from 70 years ago. A small settlement surrounded by rice paddies. You would think it's a typical rural village inhabited by typical rural folks. But this small village just north of the nation's capital is home to one of the Philippines' best-kept wartime secrets. Virginia Suarez, a human rights attorney from Manila, has been helping the victims of Mapanique or Malaya Lolas for almost a decade now. She tells me shame was the primary reason for these victims to remain silent for more than half a century.
November 23, 1944, itong Mapaniki, binomba ng mga sundalong Hapon. Maraming tinamaan ng bagsak ng mortal at ninanong.
The handful of these Lolas still vividly remember that day 70 years ago, and they begin to share the memories so brutal that they can barely bring themselves to speak about. Lola Pilagalang was 14 years old when the Japanese came.
Nagpa yung aking kamay na gano'n. Saka kinuha ako ng hapon, sinalakay ako. Nang magising ako, natulog ako kanwari, natulog ako sa sakit ng dinamdam ko. Nang panluray-luray ang aking katawan, nakita ko may dugo ang aking damit sa ilalim.
But that's not all she says. It's then that her voice begins to crack and tears roll down the deep wrinkles carved by years of agony.
Ang tatay ko, sinaksak ng bayoneta. Ang kapatid ko, pinapalo ng kahoy na mahaba. Kaya pag nabubuksan yan, parang punong-puno ang aking kwan pag naaalala ko yung ginawa sa mga magulang ko. Pinatay nila. Punong-puno ang parang akong gusto ring mamatay.
Attorney Virginia Suarez explains that the Women's International War Crimes Tribunal in 2000 had concluded that the mass rape of the women of Mapanique was organized and systematic in nature.
Pinagpapalo nila, pinarusahan nila ng todo. Merong pinutulang ari, may iniwa itong laman nito, pinasisigarilyo, pilit na pinaamin ng mga hukbalahap.
The suffering that they have committed, that's the unspeakable terror that they felt when they were abused, that's really injustice. This case is a crime against humanity. This is, I think, is the ultimate violation of human rights.
Behind Pula, or the Red House as they call it, the now 86-year-old Lola unlocks the gate allowing us into the darkest and most difficult corners of their lives. To this day, the women of Mapaniki, all of them now in their 80s, remember their ordeal with chilling clarity. Two childhood friends, Lola Lita and Lola Perla, were among the hundreds of girls and women who were raped repeatedly over the course of days. It was dark, they recount, and there were some 200 soldiers lying around.
Pagkatapos, pinaghila-hila kami riyan ng mga Hapon. Kanya-kanyang kwarto, meron dun sa baba, meron sa taas.
It was here, on one November day in 1944, that Japanese soldiers took turns violating the Filipinas. They raped a mother and her daughter at the same time in one of the many rooms. Within one night, the two old ladies recall, "We lost our youth, we lost your innocence."
Parang nanariwa na naman sa akin, alaala sa aking puso, yung mga karanasan ko dito na napakasakit isipin, masakit na maalala. Kasi dito nangyari yung hindi ko inaasahang mangyari sa buhay ko noong ako ay edad 13 taon dito sa bahay na ito.
Because the sorrow never ended there, it still continues to this day.
Nang karanasan ko dito na hindi ko malilimot, sa loob ng 24 oras, dinanas ko ang kataktak na hirap, parusa, gutom.
They were already victimized in 1944, and they remain victims even up today. And the victimization against these women continue for the last almost 70 years. Why? Because until now, they haven't received any genuine public apology. They haven't received any justice. So, considering the lapse of time, that's another injustice to them.
What happened on November 23rd, 1944, what the young girls of this remote village had to witness, what they had to endure, what they've had to leave buried in their hearts and their minds for half a century. This house may soon be the only witness around here to remember those painful cries, the helpless wailings from those nights. May pag-asa pa ba? Is there hope? The handful of survivors ask. Bundled up in raincoats, fighting frigid temperatures in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul are halmonis, or Korean survivors of the Japanese military sexual slavery. It's not a rare sight to catch, as they have been protesting every Wednesday since January 1992. But the